All right. Well, thanks again for being here. And for any of you that were here last year when I presented, when we start out, there'll be some similarity, but trust me when I tell you, it's a whole lot of new material. But what we're going to talk about, the idea is Pride is not just a strategy, but it's all about the tactics and what we're really going to dive into. And there's a whole new case study that I've included that from the work we did with Palm Springs, it's really going to dive into a lot of the tactics of what we used when we were trying to kind of make all this stuff work that we're going to talk about. So that's what we're going to get into is tactics determining how we're going to get there. So if anybody's tagging, I want to make sure I'm very easy to find. Those are the two main profiles. Just tag away. But what we're going to do is get started, and this is the similarity from last year. I always kind of get started on, because there's so much we can talk about, banner ads and email campaigns and so forth. But what we're doing is we're getting started with the idea of content. Content is where we're starting. And that could be photos, videos, editorial. And what I'm showing is it could be your content. I've talked to some people over the last few days that there's still a lot of branded content being developed out there for destinations. And of course, a lot of content from influencers, from bloggers, and so forth. But you get that content, and then what do you do with it? And so what we're going to dive into is, are you going to be pushing it out through advertising on Facebook? Are you going to post it on your social media, post it on your website? And then not just measuring and seeing how it's performing, which of course is critical for this type of work, but also are you monitoring? Are you paying attention to conversations and seeing how do you fit in to kind of that ecosystem of are people talking about your destination in the LGBT travel space? So this is the part, and sorry, the font doesn't quite come out always just right, but at least it makes it into the slide. But this is the part that we're not going to dive into this too deeply. Last year, David was very nice and kind and told me that this was one of his favorite slides from last year. Was this? I call it my crazy slide. But what we're going to do, I'm just bringing these pieces up. What you can do is, what we're going to do is kind of map out really quickly where a lot of social media fits in to this world of, are you speaking directly to people, just one-to-one relationship, what I call more of a linear, just, I have 10,000 followers, I'm on Instagram, and that's how many people I can reach? Or are you going beyond that into friends of friends? Are you tapping into more of like a viral nature of social media where you can reach people you don't know, but they're kind of like-minded and folks that you're connected to are engaged with you? So what I'm going to do is zip through this so you can kind of get a sense, especially when we start out with Facebook. Facebook's the one that our grandparents share recipes on. Everybody likes Facebook, but it's very siloed into that 5,000 max personal profile. And so you really cannot reach friends of friends through there. You're not seeing other people's content. You're seeing just this content from the folks that you're following. So like I said, I'm not going to get into the details of this. We'll mention TikTok a few times because TikTok is kind of an up-and-comer. But what's important is just trying to get a sense of where all these different social media lie, whether it's a Facebook business page. And also I show a Facebook business page is anything that's below the line is just a very one-to-one connection. And especially Instagram. Instagram, everyone's favorite. But again, you're reaching the people that are directly following and paying attention to you. Of course, that's changing. They have a whole new section called suggested posts. So they're getting into it a little bit. But I say all this because it's going to make a lot more sense for all the rest of what we're going to talk about. Where we come from is there's a power zone here. And it's really, oddly enough, it's the two that get probably talked about the least. Twitter and LinkedIn. And Twitter and LinkedIn are the two that probably have the strongest opportunities for you to post things and reach people that you never knew. Because it's all about being able to, they have an algorithm, and their little AI and their artificial intelligence is able to figure out, like, I think you're going to like to see this post from this person you've never heard of before, but all the people around you seem to like this stuff. And so that's how you, as an individual or as a company, can really break out. And Twitter, we put out there, Twitter's not all about politics and screaming and crazy, that there's a huge amount of content, and they're also very good at showing you what's going on from folks that you've never even heard of before, but they're very related to your industry. So whenever you want to kind of break out, those are the areas that we focus on the most. And of course, I'll go back one. And of course, the idea is that little piece that came up, because what you're really trying to do is not just post and reach people you're directly connected to, but really, how can we get it out there and reach people several degrees of connections away from us? So it's all about being engaged. The engagement is what turns, especially when I was showing Twitter and being in that power zone. If you're only posting on Twitter specifically, if you're only posting and you're not really engaged, you're not like showing interest in others, you're not liking anything, you're just posting and talking about yourself, you're going to be very limited to what you can do, because now it's a very you're just speaking at people, you're not speaking with them. With means you're engaged. With means I am showing interest in others, especially in my industry. I'm showing interest and I'm liking, I'm sharing, I'm commenting. And so I always just show, especially for a destination, what does engagement look like? And so, user-generated content is a huge one. So people are in your destination, they're posting. What are you doing about it? Are you part of that conversation? Does anybody even know you as an organization, a destination, DMO, any of it? Do they know you exist? So it's engaging with them, liking, commenting. Here's another, it's for Coachella, this guy's out there posting Gaychella. But it's also, of course, knowing who are your stakeholders, who are the folks that are part of your organization or in your destination, and especially if they're speaking to the LGBT community, what are you doing to be a part of all that? And so a big part, Purple Room, they're one of those. And then, of course, there's hotels. So you can retweet their stuff, you can share it, and that's the thing, is that you can't necessarily share as easily on some of the other platforms, which is why we spend more time when we're getting into really the stronger outreach. We do a lot on Twitter. But we're doing that, and then, here we go. And then, I was able to get this slide in there. Excellent. I wasn't sure if it made it. And so, looks like, oops, there we go. Engagement also looks like you're posting, and you've got this going on, and this was, sorry, I didn't know this slide was going to be here. I have to reorient my mind because I had a different way of telling this story. What's important is that there's a lot of content going on out there, and you can actually do things like this. This is one of the things we're doing with Rancho Cordova, is that there's a Pride Festival nearby. You can then post, because wouldn't that be a perfect thing for anybody that's kind of paying attention to the Pride Festival and get a chance to know that they can maybe go whitewater rafting, or they can do other activities in your area. So you can't really do that as easily on Instagram. You can do it a little bit on Facebook, but it doesn't really have any virality to it. You don't really reach out to folks. But on Twitter, you're able to, and what you're showing, here's one for Pride. So you can look at Sacramento Pride, you can see, wow, there's this great post, I want to be a part of that. Now, you don't want to overdo it, because otherwise you're just a spammer. You're just, your stuff is out there and that's all people see, and they'll think you're crazy, and they won't pay attention. But what you can do is comment on these things and put something like this, and you can talk about your destination. You can put these things out there, whether it's Pride for Sacramento. And the best part is that if you do this and you have a relationship with those folks in advance, and that you're actually liking, commenting, and engage with them, the performance of all this will be much stronger, because those algorithms, Twitter is just sitting there saying, oh, they seem to like each other. All right, great. You posted there. I'm going to make sure all those folks that are following Sacramento Pride, Visit Sacramento, all of them could play a part in this kind of ecosystem for how you can get yourself out there. And when it comes to Sacramento, you're going to see, for anybody that's interested, like the Sacramento LGBT Center is very strong, the Pride Festival. For other examples, Connecticut. If you wanted to duplicate this in Connecticut, what you would end up doing is Hartford Gay Men's Chorus. They're very strong out there, and they're very engaged with others. You kind of start to become friends with them and engage with them. You would end up with that same capability of being able to tap into their networks and vice versa. That would be a win-win relationship. And so you'll see some of that. You'll see some of that in different destinations as you start diving in to see what's going on. But again, and here's the kind of when we were talking about Twitter and Instagram and all that. Remember I said linear. Linear relationship is all about how many followers I have. So traditionally, how well you can do is just purely based on how popular your profile is. And that's the way most, especially we were hearing yesterday, that's how most influencer type work is. How many people do you have? 10,000, 100,000? But it doesn't always work that way. The moment you go from linear and very one-to-one relationship and you go into that friends of friends, see this post? This is a sports guy, so this is an extreme example. But that post is extremely popular. It did really well. And it's not it's not an advertised post. This was just purely something he posted. But look at how many people are following him. 2,000 something. So you ask yourself, how does that happen? It's because somebody, for him, this is an extreme example, but that shows you just that you're able to post things. You could have like 1,000 followers, but if you do it right, it doesn't happen all the time. But if you do it right, and you're tagging and you're doing that whole visit Sacramento and visit Rancho Cordova and Sacramento Pride, and you've got relationships, you can end up with performance that has nothing to do with how many people are paying attention to you. And that's huge. And that's what's going on nowadays. You're seeing a lot more of that. And that's why there's so much more interest in things outside of just your Instagram, Facebook. You see a lot more going on LinkedIn and Twitter, but also TikTok. TikTok is also tapping into this philosophy or this style. And you're finding that on TikTok especially, you're able to create content and get people to find you that never knew about you. So what is the status of where all this is today? So, what we're dealing with is, here's the most recent chart I was able to get. And it really shows you that Facebook is still the dominant one out there. 2 billion people. So your first thought is, I need to put all my energy into Facebook. But Facebook, for all of its greatness, is the best you're able to perform is on your personal profile. You could do well on your business page, but only if you do tactics such as really like assuming the identity of your business page and going around and engaging with others when you post. That's a lot of work. It's a lot more work than it is on other social media. But some do it. But in general, you're constrained to being able to reach your 5,000 max people. So everything is very, very, very siloed, unless you pay. You can pay and advertise, which we'll talk about as well. So Facebook's the biggest, Instagram next. See, TikTok now is number 3. So that's, they really are your up-and-comer and the one I think a lot of folks are paying attention to. And here we are with talking all this about Twitter, but Twitter's the smallest out of those 5. And yet the opportunity, just like LinkedIn probably should have been measured there. I think maybe it would be number 6. Both of those, because of the fact that you're able to tap into friends of friends, that 339 million actually has a lot more value to you. And I showed this because I found it was handy. It comes from CNBC, but it also showed the value of travel and social media and just giving you a sense of how people are utilizing, especially Gen Z and some of the younger folks, how they're utilizing social media in order to figure out, where do I want to go? What do I want to do? Once upon a time, it was a much more active thing. I'd go on Google, I'd say, gay travel Key West, find out what the hotels are, what's going on. So that's the active search. But nowadays, it's been quite a number of years where social has taken over that active search into the more passive side, where people don't know where they want to go. But they're kind of sitting back there and they're looking on their feed, they're seeing what's happening with their friends, and they're like, oh my God, why is everybody posting about Key West or Orlando or whatever's going on? They're seeing it from other folks, and then they're getting that idea like, oh wow, I want to go there too. And so it's that whole passive discovery versus active searching has really changed a lot of the landscape of what we're dealing with here. And so essentially that's what we do, is that everything we've done is with Twitter, we have this network of profiles. We get it out there and we post content across like New York City theater and so forth. So we're tapping into multiple themes, and we're tapping into that kind of friends of friends network. But that's actually also, people have often asked, how do you work with influencers? So we heard yesterday, having the Gabers agency, they're doing a great job. They're getting out there. They're working with a lot of influencers. Our work has been a little different. What we end up doing is we end up engaging with influencers over a period of time. So then when clients have come to us and said, oh, I want to reach, I have this campaign and I want to be able to work with certain types of influencers that have this sort of audience or niche that resonates with our destination, we're able to do that because we're already engaged with them using all that same stuff I've talked about. We're liking, we're commenting, we're sharing their stuff. And they may be a lot bigger than we are, but they're like, who are these folks? This was years ago. Who are these folks and why do they like me? And people like to be liked. And so they would end up liking and commenting and sharing on our stuff, and we ended up with an entire network of influencers that we were engaged with. And so then when a campaign came along, I didn't have to cold call them and say, hey, I'd like to work with you. They knew who we were. And so it's this whole ecosystem, and you all could do the exact same thing. You could find folks that are in your industry, in your region, and just kind of, I would say Rachel is probably one of the best. You do this all the time, and you're very, very good at it. Oh, I know. I have to update some of those things. And then before we go into the case study, and there's structure. And so the structure is also very important, but most people know the structure because the structure is uniform, whether it was Instagram, whether it was Twitter or LinkedIn. You're using hashtags. a bit, but you're using the @ symbol. @ symbol, typing something in, and on Twitter it's the easiest to see because it maintains the user profile name. But it's always very important. If you're posting something, don't automate your posts about content that you've got going on and just throw it out there. Try to utilize the @ symbol, tag who you're talking about, because if you're doing it right, you're tapping into their network. You're only tapping into their network if you're engaged with each other and you've turned the one-way into a two-way relationship. But if you have, now you're tapping into their network and vice versa. So the structure of all these posts is very important. And this is just an example of some work we did with Seattle. You're able to, tap into, it's Thompson Seattle Hotel, it's a chef. So we're really creating these posts to do the heavy lifting and the work for us. This one here I use as an example because it's a video. So now the work that's being done is not so much the content as much, it's a combination of the content plus the video itself. And so these videos are out there and they're very compelling nowadays. And then here's one that's pure work. It's getting the point out about gay travel to Italy. It's tagging specifically the company that's doing the gay travel, and it has a URL, it has a link with a call to action. So this whole thing, and those units, as we were talking about, you saw with Rancho Cordova and kind of posting on a Sacramento Pride thing, those units are the ones that you're able to kind of take and move around and get them out there on different things. So you can post either just natively on your own, or you can kind of get them out there as in the form of comments on other related posts, as long as you don't, they said, overdo it. So here's kind of an example that we had done with Palm Springs. So Palm Springs, they'd hired us and we came on board to kind of utilize a lot of the things we've talked about. One of the first things we were able to do, which was different, especially during the pandemic, this was actually last year, and so just as everything was starting to open up, there wasn't a lot of fresh content out there, and they weren't really in a position yet to have influencers come out and capture new content. So what we did is we went to some folks that had stuff out there, Too Bad Tourists and Nomadic Boys. And we went to them and they both very strong in the influencer and blogging and social media world. And we said, hey, you have Palm Springs content, can you update it? And then also, while you're updating it, include Visit Palm Springs in the content. And they did. So what they did is they updated, make sure if anybody's closed or anything, make sure to remove all that. But you could see the performance in there. So all of a sudden now you're dealing with, they've got this built-in audience, they've got everything ready to go. And so they had a really great, strong, and they even put it on their Instagram stories and so forth. So we were able to get that right out the bat. But again, keep in mind, this is the part that's going to carry forward. It taps into what we talked about and carries forward into the rest. Those were momentary. Everything that folks like these do, they're momentary. They have a blog, which is good for Google and for folks that are searching in the future. But it was all in the moment. They posted, it reached a great audience, and that was it. But now what you always want to be thinking is, what can I do to kind of keep the content going out there 365 days a year? And so what we talked about, posting it in places where you can reach friends of friends and getting it out there, that's one kind of aspect where you can kind of get it out there to work above and beyond just the linear part about the folks that are following them. Another part, of course, is advertising. That's where you start looking at this and going, what can I promote year round, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, and so forth, and reach a really targeted audience. So in the meantime, Palm Springs Tourism had their own content. They had some really great LGBT content, and so most destinations do. So what we did is we just took their content, and then we were starting to share that throughout our own networks. And as I pointed out, sharing is a very big part of being able to take existing content and getting it out there. But you can't really do that. Like, I'm on Instagram and I see this great picture, I can't really do a whole lot. There are tricks and ways to do it. But in general, they're not really built that way. So what we were able to do is get all this content, all this stuff that's, whether it's LGBT or just kind of related, and especially this one. This was a really good one that had the whole, LGBT family in Palm Springs coming in. So we got their content out, and then we took some of their content and we posted it through our own network. And a lot of this allowed us, as we were talking about before, once we do this, we're able to advertise our own content. So we grabbed their content, and then we got it out there, whether it was through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and we promoted it through a paid campaign, including video. They have some fantastic video, which let's see if we're able to see how that looks. So and then this one here is fun. Ties in with the parents we saw. quick too. If you take note, that was short. That was 15 seconds. And that's important too. People do not have the attention span you want them to have. They're not going to sit there and give you 10 minutes of their time unless you give them a really good reason. That's a tip I didn't put in this. But always look at social and these sort of clips to get them excited. They look, they go, wow, that's compelling. Let me see more. But don't give them the more at the beginning because they'll probably go, oh, I don't have time for that. And they continue on. And so we talked about getting it out there. How do you extend the lifespan of all those posts and all that content? Most of us and most agencies, almost everybody does this in-house in some way, shape, or form, but it's the Facebook targeting. And Facebook came up with some amazing ways to target. And they're changing it, they're making it harder and harder nowadays. But in general, you're able to say, in this case, it was saying, I want to get this campaign out there, or this content, and I want it to reach LGBT travelers who have shown an interest in this case, Spain, Madrid, Barcelona, and who live in New York. So you're able to reach a very specific audience and reach them, geo-target exact feeder markets, just like what we saw earlier about the Miami and the data that they collected. And you're able to translate all that same stuff you can do on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and so forth, and you're able to translate that out into, this is mobile campaigns. So you can do mobile, you can do website banners, videos on television. And then once you start getting into what we were seeing when they were talking about, when Communify was talking about Sacramento and programmatic and the ads campaign, this is what programmatic looks like, which simply means you're able to say, I want to place on LGBT websites, or I would just want to place on websites in general, but I want to reach an LGBT audience, and I want to target, and you could target people based on lots of crazy data sets. You know, frequent flyer travels, first class travelers, adventure travelers, and so forth. And in addition, the best part over the last year or two is now you can reach all those folks on connected TVs. And whenever we hear and read in the news that Netflix is going to get into this, that's why people get excited. Because you can automatically kind of program that. Those commercials that we showed for Palm Springs, I can get those on the screen. I can get those full screen on Hulu. I can get them on soon to be Netflix, but in this case, it's also showing that you can get them on a lot of Roku, Pluto TV, and there's an LGBT network, Reverie, and you're able to get it out there on there as well, all through programmatic. And then, of course, you know, in the campaign with Palm Springs, things started to open up. They had Pride. So here's Pride coming along. What we were able to do is then coordinate with some folks that they brought in and then amplify their content as well. So again, these posts, they had this great, you know, during Pride, the posts were there. They were getting all this horsepower. But what we did is we took those and then we used all that as advertising content and kept that message going. You can do it 30 days, 60 days, or all year round. And then, of course, it was Pride. There was a lot of user-generated content. So what we did is we engaged with the user-generated content. We didn't post any advertising-oriented types of things on these, but what we did is we commented, liked, shared, and we brought Visit Palm Springs into those conversations as well. That's the thing. These conversations are going on, these posts, and all you have to do is just you know, especially if you're already engaged with them. There's folks that are recording the Palm Springs Pride. Out Magazine was there, and they were doing all their stuff for Palm Springs Pride. So all that stuff is content that you're able to be a part of as any type of destination or organization. And then we actually worked with local media. So in this case, I'm showing that we took Gay Desert Guides content in Palm Springs and then amplified that through our network. And then we also worked with Palm Springs Life. So, and there was a few others as well. So then when there's content that's being generated on the ground, all that could be part of your campaigns as well. So what you want to do is, everything is about leveraging and pulling that content out. And then we do a video show, and we were able to then interview a variety of different folks, whether it's Film Festival, Purple Room in Palm Springs, Purple Room Supper Club, Gay Desert Guide, and we were able to pull their stories and create videos and make that all part of the campaign as well. And what's good is that when they take your videos and they start sharing it on their stories and so forth, and that's what you really want. If you create video and content, people will share it. And then this is wrapping up this whole train of thought. By monitoring, as we were talking about before, monitoring kind of like what's going on with LGBT life in Palm Springs or gay travel to Palm Springs, we discovered that these folks who were Amazing Race winners once upon a time, and they've got a great following. It's Will and James. They got hired by Palm Springs and Out Traveler to come in and do a whole campaign. And so what we were able to do is we knew them, and we were able to then work with them and share their content. And so all of a sudden, here's stuff that we didn't even know existed that helps drive more and more travel to Palm Springs outside of even the Pride Festival time. So that's where I say you can monitor. There's lots of, I'm showing niche communities that can really resonate with your destination, with your business. I'm just showing that I think most of us in this room know what bears are, but in the world of bears, there's lots and lots of content. There's a magazine called Bear World Magazine. Whatever niche you want to pursue, you could probably find, not so much a magazine anymore, or even a website, but you can find them in groups on social media. And it might even be Facebook groups and so forth, but you can find them and you could tap into and become part of their networks. And so, I just show this for what we do with the I Love Gay. We're tapping into a lot of different niches, but especially transgender, it's very hard to reach because you can't just say, I want to reach transgender people on Facebook with their data. It doesn't work that way. But you can reach them through Facebook groups, or Twitter is huge for the transgender community, and they're very easy to find. And then lastly, what we're doing this year is now, when we talked about all that user-generated content and all the influencer content, what now we're doing is trying to pull it together into themes. So what we're trying to do is now like pull it together and hire a writer that can pull a lot of this together into like a theme of, in this case, food and gastronomy, but you could do about sports, you could do about anything, and then you could take those and then start to promote those to foodies that have shown an interest in a destination. So it's just an idea of how you can leverage a lot of user-generated content to be able to bring all this together. And so I'm going to whiz on through here because we want to have a few minutes for a Q&A at the end, and they told me at the last minute I have to be quicker than 30 minutes. So, but what are other destinations doing? And so this is Long Beach, California. They have, and this isn't part of the tourism office, but they work closely with them. So you're seeing a lot of this going on. You're seeing Visit Miami, Miami CVB. They have profiles that are dedicated just to the LGBT market. UK has been huge in this, and they have Gay Britain as a profile, and it crosses over into Facebook, into Instagram, and so forth. And even more importantly, is outside of tourism, you're finding, in this case I'm showing for Philadelphia, but DC, Atlanta, they all have a more formal LGBT presence based upon regions and cities that is not just tourism related, but they tap into tourism a lot. So you're finding a lot of this going on in terms of destinations really jumping into this. And so, and at the end of the day, you're always measuring the performance. So, the performance is very easy to make sure you're like, is it working for me? How many have I reached? And I show this because this is especially on Twitter. The video that you saw from Gay Britain and the UK campaigns, the blue shows how many people they were able to reach on an organic, just organically, and that was all based upon kind of following all that stuff we talked about, being engaged. If you weren't engaged and you just posted video all by itself, unless you had a huge following, you wouldn't have that much in blue. That was organic, natural reach. But when you do those things, you can really get a lot of performance, and then the orange is what was paid for. But the numbers are huge. You're able to reach a lot of people. Those campaigns, by the way, paid is about $500. So for about $500, that's about what you can get, which is pretty decent exposure out there. And then, of course, on Facebook, you're able to measure it the same way. And what you're measuring is not only how many people saw it, but how many people engaged with it, how many people clicked through. So you're really getting a good sense of how interesting your content is and what you should continue. So that's, I misspelled my own name on there. I have to fix that. But that's how you reach me. If you have any questions or any of that stuff, feel free to make outreach at any time. And I think now we're going to see if anybody has any questions here.
And from Matt, please. Yeah.
All right.
I love it, Matt. You called yourself out for spelling your own name wrong. I love that.
I don't even know how that.
That's awesome.
Weird moment.
Facebook it's the gift that keeps on giving, and it's like a tide. It comes and it goes. Yeah. They had their first ever down quarter, Q4 of 2021. They lost revenue. They lost market share. They lost users. And I love because I wrote it down. You said it's not just a place grandparents go for recipes or share the recipes on. What's going on there? It's lost 48%, 40-something percent of its value in its stock market in just this year. What's happening?
Well, they're the biggest out there, and so they get, I don't want to just say attacked the most, but they get a lot of attention. And so there's just a lot of things. Number one, of course, Apple fights them, and so Apple made it so it's a lot harder to target Apple users on the phone. And so that's a big part. But also, they are under attack. So when it comes to politics, when it comes to a lot of things, they're having to remove a lot of the selects, the ways that we were able to target people. They've removed a lot, and for some reason they picked categories, and LGBT is a category. So LGBT, it's much harder for us to target an LGBT audience on Facebook this year than it was last year. And they've made it so that we're getting a lot of what I call Facebook refugees, because they've made it so that you can't just run an ad unless you jump through their hoops to say, you know, I can run. They consider LGBT and ads as kind of political. Even if it's about a destination, it's political. And so immediately you have to be approved to run political ads. So they've got the hurdles and everything have gone higher and higher, and their revenue has gone further down.
Would you say some of that is self-inflicted?
Yeah, I think so. They just didn't really anticipate where things were going. And they like to fight it instead of trying to, like, sometimes maybe they should step back and listen, but instead they like to fight. There's actually ads going on out there right now. I've seen ads on TV that are all Facebook trying to say why Apple is so bad for doing what they did. And I was like, wow.
It's the war of public image. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, you know, he famously, he was testifying in Capitol Hill, and you're right, they came after him with knives, and it seems both sides of the aisle want to take a chunk out of them and out of tech at the same time. But man, he did himself no favors with that metaverse video. Did everyone remember that, where he didn't blink and he looked like Data from Star Trek, and just and it was pilloried. SNL did a send up of that. There's cutting edge and there's bleeding edge. Do you think they're bleeding a little bit in the metaverse space?
Yeah, they're just because they, you know, that whole shift over. I mean, I won't profess to say I've got all the answers for all that, but from where I'm sitting and I watch, you know, it's most things have a product life cycle, and you know, and they hit a peak, but everything with Facebook has got such limitations that there was only so, even though they have the most users, the limitations kind of made it so they seem to have hit a peak a while ago. And that's why you're seeing, I mean, TikTok is the area that's got the most excitement for new growth, and it's because their product life cycle, it may still be in this position here. So I think a lot of folks are kind of looking at that going, I'm going to start shifting some of my attention over to where the new waves are at.
What if you don't like dancing? Can you still watch TikTok?
Yeah, you know, TikTok's crazy. I mean, I feel like I'm too old for it. And when I create content, my content's very boring, and I'm excited if I get like 1,000 video views. But these folks will get like thousands and thousands of video views, and it's younger people who have learned how to be able to create content that's very compelling, and they end up with these huge followings, and the numbers are staggering. When you figure out how to succeed, there's a lot of right answers, I think. But when you do it right, the opportunities there are huge, and I think a lot of companies are figuring that out, and they're really migrating that way.
That's a good way to think of it. There are a lot of ways to succeed. You can skin that cat 1,000 different ways.
Yeah, there is no one right answer. People are looking for the right answer, but there is no one right answer. There's a lot of different formulas for that.
Insta, do you think, because, you know, what Facebook bought it in 2012, somewhere abouts?
Yeah,
about 10 years ago, something like that. Do you think they're trying to add all the bells and whistles to it to really make it the new Facebook?
What they're trying to do is be the next. They're copying TikTok.
Yeah,
which makes them. You know, who wants to be in that business model where you're looking at a competitor that you still are much bigger than them, and you're looking at them and trying to copy everything they do, and so but that's been that way. They've been doing that since Snapchat came along, and then they started creating stories, and they succeed at some of that. You know, Instagram has got a great thing going with a lot. But, you know, yesterday I thought it was more telling, and these are just anecdotal, but when Gaber's agency was here, Kirsten, the way she talked about Instagram, her not just her tone, but the verbiage she used made it clear. It's like, that was not the cool kid on the block anymore.
Yeah, no, and that's kind of what I'm sensing. You know, the grandparents are going for Facebook right now, and soon they'll be on Instagram too.
Yeah.
And I can't let you off here without asking about this. You know, our friend Mr. Elon Musk. You know, was going to buy Twitter, and then he said, "Wait, hold on, but let me check and see how many of these accounts are bullshit before I offer $42 million for this company," which was $1 billion, which was a really strange thing to do.
Yeah.
And they just seem to be. But part of that discussion I learned on CNN. I haven't double checked this, but the percentage of the American public that is actively on Twitter. Anybody? What percent of the American public is actively on Twitter? 3%. 3% of the American public is actively on Twitter, and the disproportionate amount of energy it receives and coverage it receives in the news media is something. It's a real tail wagging the dog kind of a situation. Now, that said, those who are on it are influencers, and they are politicians, and they're celebrities, and they are people who carry a much bigger weight individually in terms of brands than the rest of us put together. But it is really worth thinking about sometime, each of these platforms. I love the point that you made about, you know, you don't have to have that many followers. If you have the correct strategy behind your post, you're going to kill with it.
Yeah, and there's there's a lot more to it. It's very interesting, and it can be shown like online. It's very interesting how the LGBT community, maybe being underserved in certain markets, when they're emerging and really getting the word out. That's the thing, is that none of the other platforms really allow them the technology, the space to be able to do that. But what you're seeing as of today is that, like, let's just say Mexico. Mexico, all of a sudden, you've got all this activism that I couldn't tell you where it came from, but like it's huge. So you're seeing a lot of things, whether it's Guadalajara Pride. There's gay marriage is now legal in Guadalajara and Jalisco State. But you're seeing this real upswell of tons of people that are out there sharing a lot of this content. And so I would tell you that if I wanted to find out anything about, number one, it was just what was going on in Mexico right now, that is probably the number one place that you would see most of the voices of the LGBT community are sharing and getting that word out. But this has been going on in different regions. The UK has been doing it, and they are, like, whether it's Scotland, Ireland, they're huge on there. And in the U.S., it's probably more based on regions too, because some regions are very poor and do very poorly, but others do extremely well out there. So I think you just have to kind of gauge and take a look at it and figure out, like, I'm seeing the voices and the people there. Do I want to be a part of that? And I think you'd find that a lot of organizations or individuals are there.
Well, Matt, as you know, every year I look forward to your presentation. What you bring to the table is huge for us. Thank you for sharing with us. And also, thank you for being a sponsor of this as well. It's huge to us. Love the new glasses. Give it up for Matt Skallerud. Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah.